Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the City of Newport News Planning Department, I'd like to welcome you to our initial presentation for the Lee Hall Area Plan Update. I'm Carolyn Poissant, and with me today is Dr. Snithya Newby, the city's Neighborhood Revitalization Coordinator. Hi, Snithya.
Hi there, Carolyn. Thanks so much. As Carolyn mentioned, I work in the planning department as well as the neighborhood revitalization coordinator. In that capacity, I work closely with our planners on staff to assist with redevelopment and revitalization efforts across the city. I have three primary focus areas. One is to make sure that we are engaging community stakeholders such as yourself in the process of redevelopment and revitalization within your neighborhoods. Additionally, I work to encourage other organizations and community partners to engage in the process with you as the neighborhood stakeholders as you undergo redevelopment. And finally, working to serve as an advocate and a liaison between the community and our office to ensure that we are staying on top of engaging you in every aspect of what happens in your neighborhood and community. After all, ownership of your community is what our priority is. So thank you so very much for being with us tonight and beginning the process of engagement with our Lee Hall plan. I look forward to working closely with Carolyn as we move forward. Thanks, Carolyn.
Great, thank you. So normally for these types of projects, we would hold an in-person workshop. But of course, with the pandemic, this isn't really possible for large groups, so hopefully we will still reach a good portion of the community. This will be roughly a 30-minute presentation giving you an overview of the area plan process and current conditions, followed by a question and answer session where your questions may be submitted at any time through Facebook Live here or by sending an email to me at poissantcm@nnva.gov, and you can do that anytime. I'm the project manager, and so I will receive those questions and answer those as they come in at any time. So with that, we'll move forward with the presentation. So the previous area plan was adopted by City Council in 1997. The purpose of an area plan is to examine current demographics and conditions and obtain the community's input on future land use, public infrastructure, community facilities, and other things. This presentation will provide an overview of these conditions and other factors in Lee Hall to give you a sense of the community's composition and environment. The area plan document will then set goals and recommendations for land use types, the transportation network, roads, transit, sidewalks, bike paths, and community facilities, utilities, and unique features involving historic preservation and the Lee Hall Corridor Overlay District. There are several steps in the process. We're in step 2 at the beginning of community outreach, to be followed by an analysis of the community survey and other input, and the development of goals and recommendations into a draft plan. The entire process takes about 1 full year. So the Lee Hall area plan boundary is the city limits bounded by James City County and York County over to Fort Eustis to the west, and then along Fort Eustis Boulevard back up to its boundary with York County. The area includes Lee Hall Elementary School, fire stations 4 and 5, which include the training center, the Newport News Behavioral Health Center, post office, and several public park and historical site facilities, as well as several distinct residential communities. These are the highlights of the recent accomplishments relating to the goals of the plan. As you can see, there have been some roadway improvements, bus service established, sidewalks will be required with new development. The elementary school has gotten landscaping and playgrounds. Of course, it's been 20 years, so a lot of these things were long in coming. But there's also been some utility improvements with the sewer main extended, and city code does require sewer and water connections for all new development where it's available. Some of the ditch system, as you know, has been improved to help with flooding. We continue to enhance historic properties in the city, and a very exciting project is the renovation of the Lee Hall Depot. And also we have the architectural guidelines that have been implemented with the Lee Hall Corridor Overlay District. So just for background, I'm going to show a few facilities, a few photos of the area. This, of course, is the Lee Hall train station, which is managed by the city's Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism. The Parks Department, in partnership with the Lee Hall Train Station Foundation and others, has really done an incredible job refurbishing the building with historical artifacts and displays. It will really feel much like an actual functioning train station of a bygone era, and the depot is expected to be open to visitors by sometime next spring. Just across the street from the Lee Hall Depot is the Simon Curtis House, built in 1896, also known as the Boxwood Inn. It was recently put up for sale, so hopefully an enthusiastic investor will buy it and reestablish it as a prominent feature in the community. This building, located on Yorktown Road, held Ripley's General Merchandise Store, also an element of a bygone era. It did play an important role in the historic village. This was Clement's store. Unfortunately, a lot of the historic fabric of the village has been lost, and one of the goals of the old plan was to try to reestablish the historic village character. There are a number of historic sites in Lee Hall that are very well preserved, including Enview Plantation, Lee Hall Mansion, and Young's Mill. At over 7,000 acres, Newport News Park is one of the largest municipal parks in the country. A variety of facilities, including camping, fishing, hiking, and biking, disc golf, regular golf, interpretive programs, and of course, the popular Holiday Lights display, which I'm sure many of you have been through, are all featured here. Other parks in Lee Hall include Skiff's Creek Park, which is currently undeveloped, Queen's Heath, which is actually an archaeological site, and Skiff's Creek Redoubt. On the map to the right, the darker green areas are wetlands in Queen's Heath Park, and the lighter green and yellow border represent the buffer zones, which have restrictions on development as part of the Chesapeake Bay Resource Management Area. Other community facilities in Lee Hall include the city's fire academy, the Newport News Behavioral Health Center, and of course, Lee Hall Elementary, home of the Lee Hall Engineers. Another prominent land use in the area is the Oakland Industrial Park, which contains over 2 million square feet of industrial and office space. So it's a major employer, currently employing approximately 2,700 workers. So for a more complete photo tour of Lee Hall, you can Google Lee Hall Story Map, and that will take you into a scrolling version of the Lee Hall area with many more pictures and more information about the history of Lee Hall. So moving on to the statistical overview. As part of an area plan, we do have to update statistical information with demographics and other things. The Lee Hall Area Plan boundary corresponds to U.S. Census Tract 324, which is shown here in blue. The source of the data for this overview is the U.S. Census American Community Survey for 2014 through 2018. This is a sample-based survey compiled every 5 years, and it includes much more in-depth information than what was collected, for instance, under the recent 2020 census. In terms of population and demographics, Lee Hall contains less than 2% of the city's total population, so about 3,300 individuals. As you can see, Lee Hall is a little bit younger in terms of the median age at 27.6 versus 33.3 for the city. Of note is that civilian veterans make up nearly 30% of the total population over 18 in Lee Hall and 15% in the city. The racial composition of Lee Hall is similar to the city's. Lee Hall is comprised of over 1,200 households, most of which are family households, meaning 2 or more persons related by birth, marriage, or adoption. Non-family represents single persons or two or more unrelated individuals. You can see here that Lee Hall is mostly family, but it's also interesting that it has a slightly higher percentage of male heads of households, which is a little bit unusual. Lee Hall has a much higher percentage of families living below the poverty level, which is less than $26,000 for a family of four, or less than $13,300 for an individual, based on pre-tax income, including Social Security. Nearly 20% of the area's population reports having a disability, which is over 600 individuals in Lee Hall. Out of those 610 individuals, actually, with a disability, 483 are under the age of 65 and 127 are over 65. What this graph shows is the relative percentage within the age group. So, for example, 22% of children under the age of 18 have a reported disability. This could be a physical disability, a learning disability, or other types of disability. This is a significant factor that must be considered when planning future public facilities. This is a map of the elementary school districts. Note that Lee Hall is split into two districts, and a portion of the Lee Hall Elementary District is just outside the boundary. The area east of Jefferson is assigned to Greenwood Elementary School, which is located just south of Fort Eustis Boulevard. The school system is currently accepting applications for online tutoring programs in their STEM program, and I would encourage anyone interested in getting involved in the schools to contact them. This graph illustrates the different levels of education found in Lee Hall in the city, the state, and the country. About 30% of Lee Hall residents have some level of college experience, and roughly 20% have a bachelor's degree or higher. In Lee Hall, according to the census, 95% of households have a computer and 74% have broadband internet. Again, this is as of 2018, so those percentages may have increased, especially with the schools being online. The majority of Lee Hall residents are employed in three categories tracked by the census. 25% are in manufacturing, construction, transportation, and utilities, so somewhat trades. 23% are in the professional education or health services. 24% are in public administration, which includes all government agencies. These numbers do not include all of the military because it is outside of the boundary, outside of that census boundary. So the military population definitely has a big influence here in Lee Hall as well as in our region. Both Fort Eustis and the Naval Weapons Station play important roles in the community. They serve as major logistics and training facilities for their respective branches of the armed forces. The joint Fort Eustis-Langley land use study included recommendations for better communication between the base and the city of Newport News, as well as James City County and York County. Coordination is especially important on land use actions close to the borders of the bases and near the entry gates. Fort Eustis is in the process of upgrading the entry to the base, and those improvements are currently underway. When they did their community input, they found that 55% of the residents to the study's respondents to the study's community engagement survey were residents of Newport News, and half of all respondents have lived in the area for over 20 years. Over 80% of respondents have been to the base for either work, recreation, or as a guest. According to the Naval Weapons website, military bases in close proximity support approximately 90,000 Joint Force military personnel with an additional 111,000 family members, over 58,000 retirees, and 47,000 DoD personnel. and civilian employees. So as we all know, the military plays a huge role in Hampton Roads as well as here in Lee Hall, and it is important for us to accommodate the needs of our military families. Here we can see the impact of the pandemic on unemployment. The actual figure for Lee Hall is not available, but one could assume that unemployment has increased substantially given the numbers for Newport News, most likely to an even higher percentage, perhaps as much as 15%. The ongoing effects of the pandemic will likely be felt for many more months. The current moratorium on rental evictions is slated to end December 31st, which could have a significant impact on housing insecurity in our area. In terms of the median income, Lee Hall ranks lowest in the area with quite a substantial contrast to other communities nearby. These figures are from 2018, which is the latest available data, so they don't reflect the pandemic or current conditions. So the 2020 household median income will likely be much lower. The next data profile of the American Community Survey is scheduled for release in mid-December, so that information will be included in the draft area plan. We'll now take a look at the housing profile in Lee Hall. As of 2018, there were 1,258 occupied units. Renter versus owner occupied is fairly even, which is a general indicator of greater economic stability. But with much lower income levels, Lee Hall residents may struggle with other expenses such as childcare, healthcare, utility costs, and transportation. So owning a home or townhome or condo does not necessarily correspond with financial security. In 1997, single-family detached units made up 22% of the total housing unit count, while apartments made up about 50%. In terms of land area, it's the reverse, where single-family housing occupies about 50% of the land area, while apartments occupy about 25%. The median value of owner-occupied housing is a bit lower in Lee Hall than the city. The values in nearby communities are generally quite higher. The closest medians are Hampton at $186,000 and Portsmouth at $172,000. Median rent is about the same as the city, so there is not much of a price point differential in rental unit costs. In terms of other socioeconomic factors, we can see that rent is a significant expense to residents in Lee Hall, with nearly 50% of residents spending over a third of their income on rent. Again, we also see the high percentage of individuals with incomes less than the federal poverty level. About 4.5% of households do not have a vehicle. When developers perform market studies, they look at the types of economic data and the information in the census to evaluate the economic capacity of the area. This brings us to the topic of land use. This is the current comprehensive plan land use designation map for Lee Hall. The black line is the area plan boundary. The land use types represented by green areas are parks and open space. Blue are government and community facilities, including churches. The cream color is very low density or large lot residential. Yellow is single family residential, orange is medium density, and brown is high density residential. The pink is neighborhood commercial, orange is community commercial, purple is industrial, and the red is mixed use. The red shaded areas, or the mixed use, are properties managed by the city's Economic Development Department. The city is currently reviewing a proposal for a residential and mixed-use development for the property surrounding the Enview Plantation. There are no specific plans for the other parcels at this time. You can also see the large portion of parks and open space. The darker green is parkland itself, while the lighter green is managed by the Waterworks Division as part of the Reservoir Protection District. This has restrictions on development for water quality protection purposes. Within the total Lee Hall area plan boundary, approximately 45% of the land use is parks and open space, 10% is residential, 7% is industrial, 12% is transportation rights of way, 8% is community facilities, 8% is commercial, and 10% is mixed use. This is a closer aerial photo of the properties owned by the city, and they are currently zoned, as I mentioned, for mixed use. The elongated smaller parcel is part of the Carlton subdivision, and the smaller irregular shaped parcel is the community gardens area. The large area in the upper right is the Enview property. The dotted orange line represents the Lee Hall Corridor Overlay District. The district is basically a coverage of 500 feet along the sides of Jefferson Avenue, Yorktown Road, and Crawford Road. Here it's the turquoise area on this slide. There are specific guidelines and review procedures for these areas that apply to the types of uses permitted, the building arrangement, and architectural styles. The city's zoning ordinance contains the specific requirements. There are several uses that are not permitted, such as communication towers, extended stay motels, mini warehouse storage areas, and outside storage, pawn shops, and automobile uses. This, again, is a way of trying to protect the historic character of the area. A master development plan is required where on any properties that involve the overlay, which includes all of the city's properties that are zoned mixed use. The types of guidelines that apply are things like buildings must face the street, loading areas in most parking must go behind the buildings, sidewalks and amenities such as benches, decorative street lights, extra landscaping, and preservation of existing natural landscape elements are encouraged. The architectural style must blend in with the surroundings and the existing historic character of Lee Hall. The preliminary Enview development proposal currently calls for 536 residential units, including 421 single-family homes and 115 townhomes, along with a 20-acre neighborhood commercial site, as well as parks, trails, sidewalks, and other amenities. Nearly a third of the property is comprised of woodland and wetland preserves, along with naturalized stormwater ponds and a protected view shed in front of the Enview plantation. The review process will require public hearings before both Planning Commission and City Council and is subject to change. And the Development Department is still taking public comment on this proposal. Another thing to note is that all of Lee Hall is designated as a federal tax opportunity zone. Investors in opportunity zones may qualify for federal tax credits that basically eliminate capital gains taxes on the appreciation of their investment after a 10-year period. Much of the city, including all of Lee Hall, is eligible for new market tax credits. NMTC, as it's called, attracts private capital to low-income communities by providing federal income tax offsets for investments in housing, schools, and commercial space. The program can leverage as much as $8 in private investment for every dollar of federal spending. So the next step in the process is the community input survey, which will be posted on the Planning Department website next week. You can just go to nnva.gov and type Lee Hall Area Plan in the search, and it will take you to the page with the survey link on it. You may also obtain a copy of the survey by calling 926-8761 or emailing me at poissantcm, that's POISSANTCM, at nnva.gov. The next presentation will be in January, followed by work sessions with the Planning Commission and City Council, and a draft plan will be available for public comment in March or April. The final plan will be adopted by City Council and incorporated into the city's comprehensive plan. So this concludes the presentation portion. Dr. Newby and I will now address your questions.
So we don't have any Facebook questions, but we did receive a few questions ahead of time. The first one, and I'm not going to address it to anyone, either of you can answer, but why hasn't the plan been updated since 1997?
Yes, so it has been a while. Lee Hall is a relatively small portion of the city at less than 2%. But with the proposed Enview development and the other large parcels that are out there, there's been interest in investment in the area. And so it's a very important time for the community to get involved in the update of the area plan. And so we'll be working very hard on it to take all of your comments and considerations into consideration for that.
Thank you. And what kind of comments and input are you hoping to receive from residents?
So we would like to see what they would like, what you would not like in Lee Hall. We'd like to engage the neighborhoods and the communities and really help bring out the sense of identity of the community. And there might be little ways that people would like to see improvements done. There's things called pop-up, where you might do an event or you might make improvements to a vacant lot, for example, and it might not be a permanent thing, but it's a way to create interest in the community. So we're open to any kinds of ideas like that. We have the community garden space available. There's going to be grand openings with the Lee Hall Depot coming up, and so there's going to be a lot of fun stuff going on in Lee Hall. So we're looking forward to the community getting more involved.
And are you looking just for input from people who live or work in Lee Hall, or can anyone provide input?
Anyone can provide input. With the unique historic character of the area, it is potentially an attraction for tourists. One of the things that was brought up in the first Citizen Advisory Committee meeting was the idea of it really being part of the historic triangle with Yorktown and Williamsburg and Lee Hall. And so developing that potential tourism element, I think, would be really good. And so anyone in the city or even in the region that wants to comment, we're certainly happy to receive those comments.
And in addition to the comments you receive, and you've already mentioned this, the Citizen Advisory Committee, but can you just kind of reiterate who's working on the plan?
Yes, so we do have that committee, and if anyone would like to be involved in those meetings, there will be 3 or 4 more meetings. Someone who has a stakeholder interest in the community, so someone who owns a substantial property. If you'd like to get involved, we'd like to talk to you about being part of that committee. We also have a technical advisory committee, and that is comprised of city employees and from different departments, as well as from the military bases and the jurisdictions nearby. And then just the community, we really need your input, and we'll incorporate those comments, and then those 2 committees help us actually formulate the verbiage of the plan before it goes to Planning Commission.
And one thing we did hear from someone in advance is they said, we need a grocery store in this area. How are you working with the development department to identify businesses, and what role does the area plan play in that?
Yes, so our economic development department regularly works with potential developers across the city, and they help them identify sites that they could potentially locate. Of course, we in planning work with people when they have ideas for development on a site, and we can guide them through that process. with these larger properties, that is a bigger picture thing that will be a big part of this area plan. So that's why the community's input is really important. And the grocery store, I think Dr. Newby has experience with that because you live out there in Lee Hall. And are there other services you think that are needed in the area that we should keep our eye out for?
Yeah, I think the grocery store is definitely a great suggestion and something that's needed in the area because, as you mentioned, we have a thriving military community in Lee Hall. And so although they are a transient population, no matter how long they're here for, whether it's 18 months or 3 years, you need some of those staples there in the community that are easy to access. Additionally, we have the benefit of being right off of 64, which makes it a great opportunity, even especially during the summertime, when people are passing through, heading out to Virginia Beach or heading up north, to just have those staples like a grocery store and other things that will really draw people to Lee Hall. And I think the benefit of that also is because of all the historical elements that you mentioned, Carolyn, that are there in Lee Hall. It becomes a great opportunity for people to learn more about the history of the area and what's being worked on to preserve that while also redeveloping in other areas.
Yeah, and I did forget to mention the Parks Department, I believe, will be undertaking a master plan project to look at all of Newport News Park and possibly updating some of those facilities. And that is a big attraction in the area. And so between that and the depot and the other historic facilities, it really brings a lot of interest to Lee Hall. And I think just kind of branding that maybe a little better and getting the word out in a tasteful way, because we don't want to overrun the community, of course. We do want to look at creating perhaps a new image, an expanded image for the area.
And I think it's right with opportunity to really build upon the rich history that's there in Lee Hall. And again, as Carolyn mentioned, if you want to see more of a pictorial view of what's in Lee Hall, make sure you do go to Google and put in Lee Hall story map. So you'll have an opportunity to learn more about the historical elements that are there in Lee Hall that we don't want to lose. I want to make sure that we say that very clearly. We really honor and value that history in Lee Hall, but we're looking at how we can build on that in more meaningful ways.
Right. The history is very interesting, and we also want to look perhaps at the prehistory of the area, the Native American influence, and the background of how we evolved as a country and as a community, because really we are the birthplace here, but there was, of course, a lot of history before that. Mm-hmm. So we'd like to incorporate that into the historical interpretation of the area as well.
And Dr. Newby, you mentioned Googling Lee Hall story map.
Yes.
What if someone wants to view the presentation or share this with friends? How can they do that?
Great question. So Carolyn has done a stupendous job laying out all of this information. And so if you love all this content and want to be able to read it for yourself, you can go to our planning department website, and that will be available for you next week as well. And this is also a great opportunity to remind you of the survey that Carolyn mentioned that will also become available to you next week as well. Because when we talk about engaging our neighborhood stakeholders, these are very simple and easy ways that you can do this by making sure you go and download tonight's presentation and really read through it. And then send Carolyn your questions and comments that you have, because we need that diversity of perspectives and the feedback for Lee Hall and to enable us to really be successful in our redevelopment efforts. So make sure that you do that. Make sure you complete the survey when it's available to you. And also just want to put an extra plug in for our military community. We really want to hear from you. So please know that your feedback is very important to us. You are a part of our Lee Hall community and family. And so we want to make sure that we capture you and that you are engaged in the process as well.
Great. And this is the last question that was emailed to us. So in the spring, after City Council adopts the plan, what happens next?
Yeah.
So this will not go on the shelf, okay? I'm going to say that because what we want to focus on in this plan is some actual implementation projects. They might be small, They might be big. And that's why we want to really get into the nitty gritty of that so that we can bring to city council things that they can put in the capital improvement plan, in their budget. We can form partnerships to do things so that we actually see some improvements. One example is the Birthplace of America Trail. This is a project that is connecting a regional trail going all the way from the existing Capitol Trail of Richmond through James City County and Charles City County, coming down to Newport News, and it will start on Warwick Boulevard at the border of Lee Hall and James City County, come down Warwick Boulevard, and then cross over and across Enview and into Newport News Park, and then it winds its way through over to Fort Monroe and to the city's Victory Arch. So that's a very important project. The alignment for that is just becoming formalized, and we're going to start fundraising and looking at specific elements of that to construct. So that's just one example of a project that will move forward from this. Other historic preservation elements may move forward, other things with the community gardens we may identify. So we want to make this an active, living, moving, breathing plan that gets results with the community's help.
Absolutely.
Well, those were all of the questions. Would either of you like to give a closing statement?
Yeah, I can't say enough that we really want to make sure that we have the engagement of our neighborhood stakeholders at the table in this planning process. And so that means whether you own a home in Lee Hall, whether you currently live there, whether you are a faith leader there. Our faith community is a very important part of revitalization efforts because you're a part of our community as well. Neighborhood groups, civic groups, we're calling on everybody because this really takes a team approach and a team effort to build a successful plan that we can then implement meaningful change into Lee Hall. As Carolyn mentioned, this isn't a plan that's just going to sit on the shelf that's going to look really pretty and have lots of graphs and charts and things like that, but we're really going to see tangible changes in the Lee Hall community, and we want you to be a part of that. So again, please make sure next week you are heading over to our planning department page to look for that survey and respond. Look for the presentation as well. Shoot Carolyn an email or give us a call so that we can hear your feedback that way as well. And so we really appreciate this first step in your engagement process tonight by just tuning in, whether you're here live with us tonight or whether or not you catch the replay. We are very appreciative that this is your first step in engagement, and we look forward to having you at the table throughout this process.
Thank you. I think Dr. Newby said it all, and we're just happy that you're here and we're ready to move forward.
Thanks, Carol.
Ab lib, I start going, like, stick to the script.
Yeah.
Stick to the script.